Hello, hello. So, welcome, one and all, for the first time, new viewers, anyone that's taken a listen. We are reading today, getting into chapter 6 of The Secret Destiny of America by Manly P. Hall. And this book actually includes two classic works on the mysterious origins and unique mission of America, which are The Secret Destiny of America and America's Assignment with Destiny. And we're going to work through this book, and we'll see how far we get today. But we got through chapter 5 on the first read, and you can find the link to the first read in the description. And let's just jump right into it. A Roman project to give rulership to the wise. The Platonic point of view was envisioned by Plotinus to take form as a philosopher's city, establishment of which was approved by his Roman emperor as the noblest experiment in time. But the fear of the Roman senators that the projected commonwealth of learning might finally overthrow the empire brought the project to naught, as Rome continued in the advanced state of smugness that immediately preceded the complete collapse of the nation. During chess games played nearly 700 years after Plato's death, Plotinus, the greatest of the Neoplatonists, discussed the problem of state with Gallienus, Emperor of Rome. Wow, an Emperor of Rome, and I just don't even, I'm not having the slightest idea even how to pronounce his name. Gallienus, that's how we're going to say it today. Emperor of Rome. The Roman ruler was not a profound thinker, but he had an excellent mind which inclined toward the Platonic point of view. And he frequently sought advice from the great philosopher and mystic Plotinus. This friendship led to Plotinus confiding to the emperor his dream of a philosophic city. The situation and circumstances were impressive. One of the two men had the vision of the world's greatest need. The other had the power to make that vision a reality. In the Campania, not far from Rome, stood the deserted ruins of an ancient city which had been destroyed by the vandalism of men and the crumbling forces of time. Plotinus asked that this become the site of a habitation for the learned, that here, with funds raised from both public and private sources, a noble community be built to be ruled over by the laws set forth in the writings of Plato, and to honor the great man, the city should be called Platonopolis. Plotinus pointed out that such a project would not only bring honor to the wise, but would confer immortality upon the name of the emperor, lasting dignity upon the whole of the Roman Empire. Gallienus came to favor the project as the noblest experiment in time, but the Roman Senate viewed the matter with suspicion and alarm. To them, it would be a serious misfortune for the aristocracy of wealth to be challenged by the aristocracy of learning. The philosopher's city might finally overthrow the empire. Always, philosophers had been especially troublesome to the smug, and Rome was in the advanced state of smugness that immediately preceded the complete collapse of the entire empire. So Gallienus had to discover that emperors were not all powerful. He was quietly informed by representatives of powerful and aristocratic families that if he continued to entertain seriously the dream of a philosopher's city, it would be necessary to find as his successor a ruler with a more practical turn of mind. Plotinus and the emperor continued to play chess and conversationally build philosophic cities in the privacy of the royal apartments, and Rome continued on its headlong flight towards oblivion. Hey, Singe Man, welcome, dude. Excepting only recent years, this is the one time in history when a serious attempt was made to give wisdom a place in the temporal plan of living. Wise men are naturally endowed with the qualities of rulership, but they have had little, if any, voice in the rulership of the world. Their voices have been heard only after the men themselves were dead. Plato lives thus today, and his words have a greater vitality in this century than they did in his time in ancient Athens. An ever increasing thoughtfulness has resulted from the vicissitudes of recent years in bringing the realization that wars destroy not only the economic and political structures of nations, but the irreplaceable monuments of culture and learning, which are the enduring wealth of empire. Great libraries are reduced to smoldering rubble by the engines of modern warfare. The art treasures of 5,000 years vanish in the smoke of battle. The ruthless pillaging and women and wanton mutilation are inevitable, are the inevitable accompaniment of military aggressions. Both victor and vanquished are impoverished by a common loss, and posterity deprived of the noblest of its heritage. This needs not go on. The remedial action required is no more than for men to set aside in some selected part of the earth an area to be kept apart from all strife and struggle, and establish this as the common repository of the treasures of essential learning. Ooh. On an island distant from strategic military objectives could be built a city of art, libraries, museums, universities, laboratories, and observatories. Oh my gosh, that sounds amazing. These institutions could be united as one great structure, a school over all schools, the city to become the capital of the intellectual empire. It might appropriately be named Platonopolis, to honor the great man who first conceived the idea of the commonwealth of learning. See, right, like, as much as that makes me feel so excited and jazzed and stuff, hopefully be a place where like questions and like real discourse was invited, because the idea that like academia has this like stronghold on what is socially acceptable for us to talk about or think, like that doesn't make me feel comfortable, right? So like the idea of having this one thing above all things, right? It feels like a slippery slope, and it also feels like, oh my god, I want to live there. Like, I don't know. Okay, so in times of stress or danger, each nation could send to this community those of its citizens whose mental excellence would entitle them to a world citizenship. Here, protected from all outside interference, they would be allowed to continue the various works of their individual lives for the enrichment of their own time and future ages, their progressed knowledge becoming the common property of all men, regardless of race or nation. It is safe to predict that such a philosopher's city would ultimately be the most practical and certain instrument for accomplishing a world point of view in all departments of human thinking. The international nation, the dream of the future which has been inspired by the terror of modern warfare, would have its natural beginning in a union of superior intellects. Art knows no race. Music is a common denominator. Biology and physics are served by explorers into the furthermost and innermost secrets of nature. When we recognize that the poet, the scholar, and the servant are indeed a race inhabiting the suburbs of a superior world, that they are the noblest of our creatures, we can know that we honor ourselves most by honoring them. Here lies the solution to the great educational reform so necessary at this time. We cannot hope to build a nobility of man upon the sterility of a narrow, competitive, materialistic educational policy. The ignorance of man has been his undoing. Only wisdom can restore him to his divine estate. The religious motion in the modern world is away from theology and all the artificial limitations set up by creeds and dogmas. To meet the ever increasing dissatisfaction, there must be a new version concerning the substance of spiritual truth. The religion of the future will include within its own structure the best of science, art, literature, politics, and sociology. Ooh. Spirituality is not a blind faith about things invisible. It is an inspired use of things known and available. That man is religious who lives well. That man is religious who lives well. That man is sacrilegious who perverts universal good for purposes of private gain. The abstract parts of religion are useful only to the degree that they justify and prove the moral virtues. From the broad gates of the philosopher's city could flow the inspiration for a completely new estimation of the universe and man's relationship to it. When the gentler parts of learning exercise dominion over the humankind, world peace will be more than the substance of things hoped for. The Roman Senate now lies in its smug little tomb along the Appia Way, which is a place, I assume it's capitalized. But unfortunately, the temper of the Roman senator still survives to oppose the unknown and defend private privilege against the world's necessity. And for this reason, it may be as difficult to found the philosopher's city on the ruin of modern civilization as it was to build Platinopolis on the ruins of the old city of the Campania. There is one difference, however. In the last 1800 years, humanity has suffered its way a little nearer to a state of enlightenment, has suffered its way to a little nearer to a state. Whoa. I actually understood it, but I want to get it right. In the last 1800 years, humanity has suffered its way a little nearer to a state of enlightenment. We are a little older and a little wiser than the Roman Senate. Education and science are lodged in institutions far stronger than in that day when wandering teachers held classes on doorsteps or along the country road. In every nation of the civilized world, great institutions of learning have sprung up, richly endowed and fully equipped to meet the challenge of a new age. What these institutions lack is common spirit and common purpose, and an ideal strong enough to bind them into one great empire of learning. When Plato dreamed of this wise man's world, he set the chief place in it aside to be the temple of the ever-living God. Here he proposed to set up once more the column of precious substance bearing upon it the laws of the immortals for the conduct of human affairs. To this shrine the learned would come again to bind themselves with the great oath that they should dwell at peace with the other and serve all men justly and without favor. This oath is the beginning of learning and the end of strife. Whew, dang. Hey, flat fellow, welcome, man. Chapter 7. The democratic tradition preserved by secret societies. For more than 3,000 years, secret societies have labored to create the background of knowledge necessary to the establishment of an enlightened democracy among, oh my gosh, that fly, among the nations of the world. The Greek Dionysians were social and political temple builders, known as the Collegians in later Rome. The rise of the Christian church brought persecution of the classical intellectual patterns ideology, driving the guilds into greater secrecy. But all have continued searching for human happiness under a variety of rituals and symbols, and they still exist as the order of the quest. Today's thinking toward a democratic world state is neither a new trend nor an accidental circumstance. The work of setting up the background of knowledge necessary to the establishing of enlightened democracy among all nations has been carried on for many hundreds of years by secret societies. Secret societies have existed among all peoples, savage and civilized, since the beginning of recorded history. The esoteric organizations of ancient times were for the most part religious and philosophical. In the medieval world, they were philosophical and political. In the modern world, political and social. Secret societies have had concealment and protection as the first purpose for their existence. The members of these orders were party to some special knowledge, they usually took part in certain rites and rituals not available to non members. But it was more important that through the societies, they were also able to practice beliefs and doctrines in private for which they would have been condemned and persecuted if these rites were made public. A second purpose for secret societies was to create a mechanism for the perpetuation from generation to generation of politics, principles, or systems of learning, confined, confined to a limited group of selected and initiated persons. Primitive secret orders exist among African tribes, among the Eskimo, and throughout the East Indies and Northern Asia. The American Indian, the Chinese, Hindus, and Arabs have elaborate religious and fraternal organizations. In most cases, these secret orders are benevolent and the members are bound together by obligations of mutual helpfulness and the service of the public good. It is beyond question that the secret societies of all ages have exercised a considerable degree of political influence, usually directed against despotism, intolerance, and religious fanaticism. I wish this one would stay back. All right. The order of the Dionysian artificers originated among the Greeks and Syrians at some remote time before 1500 BC. It was composed originally of skilled craftsmen banded together in a guild to perpetuate the secrets of their crafts. Gradually, the science of architecture took precedence and dominated the policies of the society. According to legend, when Solomon, king of Israel, resolved to build his temple according to the will of his father David, he sent to Tyre and enraged the services of a cunning worksman, Hiram Abiff, a master of the Dionysian artificers. The members of this society held the exclusive right throughout the Greek states of designing the temples of the gods, the houses of government, the theaters of Dionysus, and the buildings used for the public games. It is certain that the Dionysians practiced secret rites and worshipped the gods under geometric symbolism, and that they possessed a body of lore which included mathematical secrets of proportion and design, certain knowledge concerning universal dynamics, and a philosophical, religious, moral, and political conviction concerning the perfecting of human society. They referred to ignorant and uncultured humans as a rough ashlar, that is, an uncut stone as it comes from the quarry, unsuited to the purposes of building. Through the refinement which resulted from self discipline and an addiction to the divine arts, man perfected himself, becoming square, upright, and true, thus forming the true ashlar, or the cut stone, which could fit with others into a pattern of masonry. In their secret work, the Dionysians thus were social and political temple builders, and the temple upon which they labored was the living temple of the living God, built of stone made ready before it was brought thither, so that there was neither hammer nor axe nor any tool of iron heard in the house while it was in the building. This temple was human society perfected, and each enlightened and perfected human being was a true stone for its building. As Grecian culture reached Rome, the Latins formed their own Dionysian society and named it the Collegia. The greatest of the collegians was an architect, Vertuvius, sometimes called the father of modern architecture. A man of vast learning, he was responsible for the superior sanitation of Rome and the great aqueducts, which still border the Appian Way. Is that how you say it? It's famous. While the collegia of the Romans were less philosophical than was the Grecian society, because of the different temper of the Latin people, it exercised considerable social power and perpetuated the substance of the old belief. The rise of the Christian church broke up the intellectual pattern of the classical pagan world. By persecution of this pattern's ideologies, it drove the secret societies into greater secrecy. The pagan intellectuals then reclothed their original ideas in a garment of Christian phraseology. Phraseology, but bestowed the keys of the symbolism only upon those duly initiated and bound to secrecy by their vows. Part of the Dionysian movement migrated eastward to build the empire of Islam, with each stone in mosque and palace bearing the mark of the master masons. Later, the migration continued as far as India, where these same marks are to be seen on the monuments of the Mughal dynasty. Man, I'm gonna pause my sound for just a moment. I gotta get this tickle out of my throat. Mute. I don't know. It's like a bubble or something. Okay, all right. Let's just keep on keeping on. All right. In early development of Europe, the Dionysians became the guild of the cathedral builders. They signed each stone with the secret symbols of their cults, and into the intricate carvings of church and chapel, they worked the old pagan figures and designs. Many guilds sprang up, binding skilled craftsmen in confraternities of arts and crafts and trades. Architecture remained the chosen instrument for the perpetuation of the great design, capitalized great design, the building of the perfect world. I like that. I mean, I do, but right. There's always like, it's like, yeah, I like it, but who's the one who decides what the perfect world is, right? Hopefully it's like consensual for everyone. All the sciences contained brilliant, far-seeing men who equally desired to contribute their part to the philosophic empire of the future. Secret societies were formed in their own professions, using the emblems established in their arts to conceal their social aspirations. Thus did the alchemists come into being. The mystic chemists seeking the elixir of life, the wise man's stone, the universal medicine, and the agent for the transmutation of metals. So juicy. I know that we're going to get into some alchemy books before long. I have a few that I haven't read. The elixir of life is truth itself, the preserver of all things. The wise man's stone is science that can work all wonders and solve all riddles of the mortal sphere. The universal medicine is wisdom, the only cure for ignorance, which is the universal disease. The agent for the transmutation of metals is the pattern of the universal state, the essence of the perfect plan for a world civilization by which all the base elements in human society can be transmuted into the spiritual gold of right purpose. In Italy, the Illuminati sought for the pearl of great price hidden in the deep waters of moral corruption. In Northern Europe, the Knights of the Holy Grail dedicated their lives to the search for the chalice of the Passion. Christian and Jewish Kabbalists pondered the letters of the scriptures to find the secret of the crown of splendors, and the Rosicrucians in their hidden houses used the rose of Sharon as the symbol of brotherly love, a simple rearrangement of the letters rose becoming Eros, the Greek god of love, Eros. Mhm. All these groups belong to what is called the Order of the Quest. All were searching for one and the same thing under a variety of rituals and symbols. That one thing was a perfected social order, Plato's commonwealth, the government of the philosopher king. To this end, each consecrated its life and knowledge, exploring ever further into the secrets of nature to discover the greatest secret of all, the secret of human happiness. Nature's capitalized. I love that. We are indebted to these brothers of the quest for our sciences, arts, and crafts of today. They were the discoverers. They were the astronomers, scientists, physicians, mathematicians, and artists whose works we treasure, but whose dreams we have ignored. They gave knowledge to the world to make men happy. We have used their knowledge to make a few men rich. We have perverted their skill, desecrated their dreams, and profaned their mysticism. But the knowledge they have given us is available to be used in a nobler way. And someday we shall awaken to our responsibility with the realization that it is our common duty to restore the dignity of learning and dedicate it unselfishly to the human need. Ah! I love that. About the middle of the 17th century, Sir Elias Ashmole, patron of the liberal arts and founder of the Ashmolean Museum at Oxford, Ashmolean, was initiated into the Guild of the Operative Freemasons of London, the first non-craftsman to be permitted membership. From that time on, the entire pattern of the guilds was changed, and speculative masonry came to dominate the older form of the craft, and the intellect builder came into his own. One veil of the old symbolism was lifted to reveal in full clarity that the guilds were dedicated to a program social and political. In this way, the old dream of the philosophic empire descended from the ancient world to modern time. Secret societies still exist, and regardless of the intemperance of the times, they will continue to flourish until the quest is complete. For more than 3,000 years, secret societies have labored to create the background of knowledge necessary to the establishment of an enlightened democracy among the nations of the world. So, right, I don't know, that makes me feel lots of all kinds. Hey, Emoji King and Alex, dudes, welcome, you guys. Yeah, the whole secret society thing, right? I mean, like, we all know it exists, and the idea of there being this benevolent force, like, I love that, you know, like, that's what we're always cheering for, and like all of the stories that we know and love, you know. Yeah, but the idea that like our government and stuff is a part of that, I mean, that's not what I want. So I don't know. Okay, so we got a picture here. The cipher signature of Columbus, reproduced above, is generally interpreted Salve Christus Maria Josephus Christopherenus. It was an I have to. It's all good, right? Hopefully, you can hear me wherever I move a lot. It was usual to build personal ciphers upon dates. Cool. If the 7 large letters above the signature are read according to the medieval symbol of numeration, the date 1420 results. Ha ha! Dude, codes. I love it. The X appears to be a double letter composed of J and X. This would increase the sum to 1430. Is this then the true and unknown birth date of the Greek navigator? Weird. Okay, here's the picture. I know I get greedy. I don't share it. I'm sharing. I try to line it up. All right. So this next one about Columbus, I'm excited. I haven't read any farther than this. That like all these other ones I've read before, or yeah, maybe this last one I didn't read either. Anyways, right. All this stuff is now. I've only ever read just the synopsis of it. And okay, so here we go. Chapter 8: A New Identity for Christopher Columbus. Many scholars were fully aware of the global form of the Earth in the time of Columbus, who, according to early historians, state documents, and his own son, was not an Italian of humble station and uneducated, but was a Greek prince with an excellent classical education. It was from a Greek port that he sailed on the celebrated voyage of discovery. He was accompanied by a mysterious stranger, which has suggested that Columbus was an agent of the Society of Unknown Philosophers. The pattern of the democratic ideal was beginning to assert itself over the tyranny of decadent aristocracy. A new world was necessary for a new idea. When it was necessary, it was discovered. As stated earlier, there can be little doubt that the Greeks were aware of the existence of the American continent long before the beginning of the Christian era. If information is not general on that point, it is equally surprising how little is known about the man Christopher Columbus, who is accredited with the discovery of the New World. The date of his birth is unrecorded, and 20 cities claim Columbus as a native. So many legends have sprung up about this strange man that it is difficult to distinguish fact from fantasy. There's something under here. It says, note, the University of Barcelona has pronounced genuine a document. Whoa. I'm already confused. The University of Barcelona has pronounced genuine a document discovered by an Italian archaeologist in 1929. It records that the treasurer of Spain counseled Colin to represent himself as Christopherus in demanding aid from the King of Spain, and states emphatically that Admiral Colin was not the same man as Cristoforo Colombo, son of Domenico and Susanna Fontanarossa, who lived in Genoa. Interesting. Right, all the stories of things like when they land in our ears. What's the where are my words? What is the aim there? What is the aim? Angle. All right. In 1937, a little book was published entitled Christopher Columbus Was a Greek. According to its author, Spiros Kateras, the real name of Columbus was Prince Nikolaus Nikolaus Ypsilantis, Ypsilantis, Prince Nikolaus Ypsilantis. Wow, that's a fun word. Fun words. Nikolaus Ypsilantis. And he came from the Greek island of Chios. The statement is backed by quotations from numerous early historians and state documents. The author of this little book has documented his opinions in a manner to bring joy to the critical reader. He mentions the following Greeks who navigated the Atlantic Ocean in ancient times: Hercules, Odysseus, Coelius, Pytheas, and Eratosthenes. Oh no. Eratosthenes. Eratosthenes. Okay. He points out that the language of the ancient Mayas of the American continent contains many words of pure Greek belonging to the Homeric period, and to quote the book, years ago, in the Republic of Uruguay, South America, were discovered traces of the army of Alexander the Great, swords and thoras with the inscription Ptolemos Alexandroi. Wow. See, right? All this stuff they tell us. What the heck, you guys? This book's been out before I was born. So, okay. All modern research in the life of Columbus tends to prove that he was not a man of humble station, poor or uneducated, and that the story of Queen Isabella and her jewels is rapidly becoming recognizable as fiction. Columbus is emerging as a man of impressive personality, with marked abilities as a leader and organizer, and an excellent classical education. Like most Greeks of his time, he admired the writings of Plato and the other classical philosophers. He had the Greek birthright of legend and tradition and was mentally well suited for interpretation of classical lore. There is much to indicate that Columbus was inspired for his voyages by Plato's account of the lost Atlantis and the records of early navigation to the west. Furthermore, Europe was not without some knowledge of geography, and in his day, there were many scholars aware of the spherical form of the earth. You know, maybe. A great trade with Asia had long passed over the caravan routes of the Near East. At the Arabs, for the most part, were as the Arabs, for the most part, were a friendly people. But with the rise to power of the Turkish Empire, most of these routes were closed to the infidel. When even the Crusades failed to keep clear the roads of commerce, it became ever more desirable to discover a western passage to the Orient. It was for this purpose that Columbus sailed, and not from an Italian or Spanish port, but from the Greek port of Mahon. It is astonishing how difficult it is to ascertain the facts about the celebrated voyage of discovery and the life of one so prominent in history as Christopher Columbus. It appears that history entered into a conspiracy to conceal the truth. History would never do that. Possibly, an elaborate misrepresentation was intentional. For certainly, the confusion began before the death of Columbus. His own son refers to his father as a Greek. It has been suggested that Columbus changed his name because of religious or political pressure, but this is in the field of conjecture. Then, too, in browsing about among old records, I have run across a dim figure involved in the life of Columbus, a strange man who seems to have served the explorer in the capacity of counselor. Nothing very tangible has yet come to light, but it is hinted that this mysterious person accompanied Columbus on his first voyage. Ooh, let me get a sip. He was not included in the list of the mariners. He did not return, but remained in the West Indies. Beyond this, no further mention is made of him. Ooh-doo-doo-doo. I love that. Okay. It is my opinion that he was such a great agent. The signature of Columbus, composed of letters curiously arranged and combined with cabalistic designs, certainly conveys far more than its inherent than is inherent in the signature of a private citizen. The importance of Columbus in the larger scheme of things is to be estimated from his relationship to the pattern of his own time. Europe, passing from the obscuration of the medieval period, was coming into the light of the modern way of life. The motion of the Renaissance had spread like ever widening ripples over the surface of a stagnant pool. Painting had been discovered. The mental emancipation of man from the tyranny of ignorance, superstition, and fear was gradually being accomplished. The democratic ideal was beginning to assert itself over the tyranny of decadent aristocracy. As the mental horizon broadened, the physical horizon extended also. The Crusades had broken up the structure of feudalism. Principalities were forming themselves into nations, and the tribal consciousness was disappearing from the theater of European politics. This progress was opposed at each step by vested interests. But the human mind was becoming aware of its own powers in a motion of continuing irresistible force. A new world was necessary for a new idea. When it was necessary, it was discovered. That which is needed is always near if man has the wit to find it. Ah, dude. True, right? Today, we are again seeking for a new world. No longer do there remain undiscovered continents to serve us as laboratories for social experiments, so we are turning our attention to other kinds of worlds, worlds of thought, inner spheres, which must yet be explored by daring navigators. Science, in the last 50 years, has discovered a new universe, the universe of the mind. The infant psychology has but to come of age for us to fully discover a new sphere for new exploration in the sciences of living. The voyages of Columbus were followed by 2 centuries of enlarging our geographic knowledge of the earth. Explorers who sailed the 7 seas seeking wealth brought home knowledge. It realized human thought form it realized human thought from its Mediterranean fixation and accomplished the still greater end of breaking the power of a Mediterranean theology and a Mediterranean way of life. Men began to think world thoughts, began to realize that while the whole earth was one land divided into continents and oceans, it still was a gigantic unity. Out of the global wanderings of stout sea captains in little wooden ships was developed our so called global thinking of today. The concept of a global world, at least in terms of geography, is now our common inheritance. After 450 years, we accept it without question, but mainly to toy with the belief that we will accomplish something in terms of ultimates if we can industrialize the entire planet. Our world is still too large for us to know how to use it. We have discovered much, but the greatest voyage still lies before us. Our venture will be into the greater ocean that lies beyond the boundaries of the unknown. The new voyages will be made in laboratories, and the contrary currents will be the cosmic rays that move through the seas of universal ether. This will require of each man that he make a long journey of discovery within himself, searching out the hidden places of his mind and heart. As Socrates so wisely observed, all mankind living along the shore of an unknown land. This unexplored world abounds in wonders and is filled with the riches beyond the wildest dreams of old Spanish conquistadors. In this land, beyond the sea of doubt, the wise men dwell together in the shade groves. And here, according to the old tradition, the scholar, the musician, the artist, and the poet, who make the discoveries that science and philosophy must later prove, have already found the better way of life. Christopher Columbus, excuse me, Christopher Columbus sailed his little ships for a land which by the writings of ancient philosophers he knew existed. And each of us, in the fullness of time, will make our own voyage in search of a philosophically chartered better world. To follow the advice of Homer, to prepare our ships, unfurl our sails, and facing the unknown, go forth upon the sea to find our own far distant native land. Dude, I love that. Dang. Brenda, dude, good to see you. Welcome, welcome. I'm loving this. We're getting to chapter 9 here. And man, how the time flies. It's crazy. I've already almost coming up on an hour. The prophecies of Nostradamus. 11 years after Columbus reached our shores, an extraordinary man was born in France. In adult life, he was both a respected physician and a mystic who was able to write accurately the history of the world to come. There was no indication at the time that in the Western Hemisphere would arise a great nation, but Dr. Michel Nostradamus saw a civilization established there that would observe, always on a Thursday, a day to express thanksgiving for freedom of religion, freedom of opportunity, and freedom of life. He prophesied that this nation would free itself from the bonds of the mother country, would greatly prosper, but would have to fight several wars, one with the Orient, before becoming a great power in a pattern of world peace, with other nations looking to it for leadership. All that he foretold is precisely according to the Platonic tradition. Histories are generally written about the men who prominently influence the events that make history. Little is written, though it might be of greater interest, about those shadowy figures who seem always to stand behind the men who make history. Michel Nostradamus, seer of France, is among the most extraordinary of such men. Born in 1503, and possessed of some inner source of knowledge beyond the reach of ordinary mortals, he wrote the history of the world to come. 200 years later, the celebrated Illuminist and Rosicrucian, the Comte de Saint-Germain, remarked to his close friend, Prince Karl of Hesse-Kassel, that he was the one who had assisted Nostradamus in the calculation of his remarkable predictions. All this is far too shadowy for sober historians, although a number have spent considerable time and developed numerous headaches trying to trace the life of the elusive Comte, who was called by Frederick the Great, the man who does not die. Isn't that okay? Just a little pause right there. All this stuff is so fascinating, but it's right. Like the words we speak, they hold such power. Like imagine that. Like, what if he was just saying it? I mean, he probably wasn't, but what if he was just saying it? And like all these people. All right. Powerful. Words are powerful. Nostradamus was a respected physician, a man of outstanding medical accomplishments. Few details of his life are available, but from the context of his manuscripts, his epistles, oh no, epistles to the King of France, and his letters to his own son, it is evident that he too belonged to the order of the quest. Mystic, philosopher, astrologer, alchemist, and Kabbalist, Nostradamus was versed in all the secret lore disclosed only to those who have bound themselves with the oath of the brotherhood. The prophecies of Nostradamus might have come entirely as revelations of the spirit, but it is equally possible that in his quaint old doggerel verses, he included part of the plan of things to come as already well set in the minds and purposes of his brother initiates. See? Ha ha ha. The things we say, they have power. And yeah, man, I remember there was a time when I actually, because I used to be obsessed with Nostradamus when I was a teenager. I used to read about him all the time and just like imagine about him and stuff, dream about it. And then I came across something that made me feel like he was just like another puppet. Like he was just another person that was just made me feel like I was a puppet. And I felt the same way about Edward Casey for a while too. And it's still like, like, oh, it's interesting. The best way to predict your future is to create it. Planting seeds, planting ideas. That's what I want to be a part of. Planting like ideas for prosperous, like awesomeness inside ourselves so that we know that we have the capabilities to do these things, right? Because we do. I can see it. The prophecies of Nostradamus might have been entirely as revelations of spirit, but it is equally possible that in his quaint old doggerel verses that he included a part of the plan of the things to come as already well set in the minds and purposes of his brother initiates. The first edition of the Prophecies of Nostradamus was published in 1660. At that time, the Americas were still the happy hunting ground of Spanish adventurers. There was no indication that in the Western Hemisphere would arise a great nation. Yet Nostradamus writes at sufficient length of the future state of America to indicate an extraordinary knowledge. The old seer refers to this country under several names. He calls it the Hesperides. I think that's actually how you say it this time, okay? I think I pronounced it wrong the whole first way. Hey, Mr. Hugh, welcome back, dude. Hesperides, right. The Blessed Isles of the West. In another place, he simply names it America. And his third designation of it is the land which keeps the Thursday. Thursday. Interesting. Okay. The old oh wait, that's today, right? Today's Thursday. Is today's Thursday? Oh my gosh. Okay, cool. Oh gosh. Okay. I got lost my spot on that one because I got all excited about it being Thursday. Where am I? Keeps Thursday. This last form is the most astonishing, for it refers to the unique American holiday, Thanksgiving, which always falls upon a Thursday. And this is the only holiday which depends upon the day alone for its observance, and is peculiarly the American holiday which expresses thankfulness for freedom of religion, freedom of opportunity, and freedom of life. And is my favorite holiday when we don't like equate it to a bunch of Native American lies. To summarize the opinions of Nostradamus concerning the future destiny of Western civilization is difficult because of the involved idiom of the original text, but he points out clearly certain things that will happen. He saw that a great civilization would rise in the Western world. This civilization would free itself from the bonds to its mother country, and then assume a free place among the temporal powers. The new country would flourish and extend its domain across the entire continent. It would grow rich and powerful, he predicted, and live at peace with its sister, Canada. He said that America would have to fight several wars, including one with the Orient. This conflict he describes as an eagle flying against the rising sun. And in his day, neither the eagle nor the rising sun had significance of the slightest importance in the symbolism of nations. Fulfilling its destiny, Nostradamus foretold that America would become a great power in a pattern of world peace and would be looked up to by other nations for leadership against the common evils of time. In short, as Nostradamus foretells the story of the Blessed Isles, it is precisely according to the Platonic tradition, and we cannot but wonder if he was a party to that tradition. He knew exactly whereof he spoke. Whether the 16th century physician of France had his visions from within himself, or whether he merely wrote down what was given to him by another, we can never know. Conventional thinkers, doubting such prophetic powers, incline toward the second alternative, and that will leave them scarcely less comfortable of mind, for the existence of the secret brotherhood plan is then virtually admitted. Nostradamus is not the only prophet who sensed or knew the future of the Western Empire. There was Dr. Ebenezer Sibley, who flourished in England about the close of the 18th century. It is reported that Sibley had a shrewish wife, and it was to escape her tongue that he retired to a garret of his house to ponder the mysteries of the universe, his meals being passed to him through a hole in the door. Dr. Sibley divided his time between an infallible elixir, which, if dissolved in wine, would dissolve all human ills, and the writing of long books dealing with astrology, physiology, and anatomy. Dude, sounds like an interesting guy. In his day, the American Republic was in its infancy, and brilliant politicians on the floor of the House of Commons were predicting that the rebellious colonies would soon be begging on bended knee to be restored to the British Commonwealth. Sibley, though a stout Britisher, expressed his regrets that he had to point out that, in one detail at least, an astrologer in his garret would prove wiser than the best politicians in Europe. For, sad to relate, the American colonies would not come home. The stars decreed otherwise. Not only would they remain outside the fold, he said, but they would grow rich and powerful, extending themselves across their continent. Americans would build great cities and develop world trade and industry. And one day, horrible thought, they would be stronger than the mother country. And this was the truth that must be spoken, if only through a hole in a garret door. Hmm. I wonder if your coworker just called Nostradamus because he knew everything, or was that really his name? Interesting. It should be remembered that among the ancients, astrology was one of the sciences of government. The prognostic aspect of the subject was not the main interest in the minds of such men as Pythagoras and Plato. These philosophers saw in the motion of the heavenly bodies and the order of the cosmos a great pattern of natural laws. The universe was a celestial empire populated with planets and suns and moons, and in a heavenly arrangement, which was a clue to the proper distribution of human affairs. The state, they advocated, should be patterned after the cosmos. Governments of men should be in harmony with the larger government of the world. Many old astrological books indicate clearly that planetary symbols were used to represent the elements of a political system, and that the astrologers themselves were part of the order of the quest. Beneath the cloak of professional astrologers, they were counselors advising kings and princes to establish better laws and rules their peoples more wisely. Nostradamus was consulted by 3 kings, Europe's most powerful queen, Catherine de' Medici. Also, man, which she is a fascinating character, right? Also consulted him on numerous occasions. His advice was always temperate and directed towards the public good. His scholarship gave a perspective on political problems that was beyond the scope of the professions of statescraft. All the petty princes of Europe in medieval times had their Merlins, wise old men, who I almost even just said Merlin when I should have. It's too late now. Old wise men who in many instances were the actual rulers of the state. It is obvious that if these counselors were bound together by some common purpose, their collective power would be considerable. And they were bound together in the secret society of unknown philosophers, moving the crowns of Europe as as on a mighty chessboard. Men of this caliber bring about the mutations of empire. It is the general opinion that revolutions begin with the common people, but this is not true. The benevolently informed always guide and direct public opinion. I love that. The benevolently informed always guide and direct public opinion. Yeah, it appeals to our hearts, right? Through the centuries, the prophecies of Nostradamus have continued to exercise a powerful force on the political destiny of the world. They have been translated into most of the languages of Europe. They were frequently quoted and reprinted during the period of the First World War, and in the Second World War, both the Axis and the Allied powers have quoted Nostradamus variously to serve their purposes. It is in the larger picture of the world's future that Nostradamus indicates the coming of the Great League, or Assembly of World Powers. This league is to be the only human hope of peace, the only solution to a competition between nations. The formation of this league begins the new life of the human race, will allow the human being at last to emerge into the state for which he was fashioned. Barbarism ends with the beginning of world civilization. To be civilized, according to Cicero, is to reach that state of personal and collective behavior in which men can live together harmoniously and constructively, united for the betterment of all. By this definition, we have never been civilized. We have existed in a state of cultured savagery. The promise of Nostradamus is especially meaningful in these difficult years, for he assures us that the Commonwealth of Nations is to become a reality. Right? I wonder. So it's been just 1 hour now. I think I'm gonna do chapter 10 and then we'll reassess. With this, there's a picture. The men through the centuries have envisioned utopia being to ages yet unborn, when the principles of natural philosophy will be applied to the problems of government and social dilemmas will be examined for solutions which are now termed impractical. The design of utopias. Oh, the picture, right. I didn't even really look at it either. Signers. Oh, maybe of the Declaration of Independence. Envisioning a utopia. I like that picture, it says a lot. Okay. The design of utopias. Sir Thomas More wrote a fable about 400 years ago to set forth the social state of man in a philosophic commonwealth, but so completely has the world missed the entire point that the very word utopia is even today a synonym for optimistic but impractical ideals of reform. Campanella, an Italian philosopher, wrote of the major tragedy and that the subject of statesmanship alone had been neglected as practically every other subject had been reduced to a science. Government officials, he insisted, should be elected after examination to determine knowledge and fitness. Boccalini contributed further to utopian literature, and Andrea sought to Christianize it with the theme, "For lack of vision, the people perish." One of the best known and least read of the world's literary productions is Sir Thomas More's Utopia. Well, we've got to read it, right? I should write it down and then I won't forget. Utopia! Utopia. Will I forget? Just write it down. Dude, where is that? Where is that thing? I will get into this chapter. I do want to write that down because that rings a bell. I think it was like from a movie I saw. My favorite pen. I love these pens. R2. Rollerball. Okay. Sir Thomas More, More. Like, I wonder if we'll ever get to the Box Saga or any of that and learn about the Moors. Utopia. Very good. Hey, I love you too, man. Okay, so one of the best known and least read of the world's literary productions is Sir Thomas More's Utopia. It was composed by a man who had suffered greatly from the political corruptions of his day. 1478 to 1535, having held high office, More was well acquainted with those machinations commonly called conspiracies of the state. More should properly be regarded as a Platonist too, for the entire framework of the Utopia is borrowed from Plato's Republic, and the book is permeated throughout with Platonic ideology concerning the ideal state. Under a thinly veiled satire attacking the policies of King Henry VIII, here then is another voice calling men to the correction of their political vices. Unfortunately, the immediate success of More's book was due to his attack on the king and the government in general, rather than any serious consideration of the remedies which he suggested. In the Utopia, More represents his philosophical and political conviction in the form of a fable which sets forth the social state of man in a philosophic commonwealth. So completely has the world missed the entire point that More attempted to emphasize that the very word utopia has become a synonym for optimism and impractical ideals of reform, which honestly, that bothers me. I mean, I don't lose sleep over it, but I do think that, like how it makes it seem so unreachable. Okay. Sir Thomas More was centuries in advance of his day, which was reason enough why he could not be appreciated. Together with the master, Plato, More belongs to ages yet unborn, to the time when men, weary of study of the dilemmas which now they examine by what they think is practical, will turn to solutions which they now term impractical. Excuse me. An important utopian was Tommaso Campagna, 1568 to 1639, an Italian philosopher also with strong Platonic learnings. Out of the wisdom of his years, Campagna composed the Civitas Solis, the city of the sun. It's beautiful. In this work, he departed from his usual interests, science, mathematics, and religion, to apply the principles of natural philosophy to the problems of government. He regarded it as a major tragedy that men had reduced to a science practically every branch of learning except statesmanship, which continued to be left to the vagaries of incompetent politicians skilled only in the arts of avarice. Unfortunately, Campagna was not able to free his mind entirely from the pattern of his contemporary world, so his ideals are confused and not entirely consistent. He viewed government as a kind of necessary evil and to be endured until each man shall become self governing in his own right. To the degree that the individual is incapable of the practice of the moral virtues, he must be subjected to the laws which protect him from himself and protect others from his unwise actions. The principal purpose of life, then, is to realize oneself from the domination of government by the perfection of personal character. Campagna envisioned the perfect state as a kind of communistic commonwealth in which men shared all the properties of the state, receiving more or less according to the merit of each one's action. His theory that the state should control propagation is a little difficult in application, but his advice that all men should receive military training as part of their education would meet present favor. Government officials, he insisted, should be elected by an examination to determine knowledge and fitness, and promotion should be by merit alone and without political interference. This view is definitely Platonic and leads naturally to Plato's conception of the philosopher king as the proper ruler over his people. Campagna may have intended his City of the Sun to be a philosophic vision of a proper world government, or may have been setting forth no more than the basis for a new constitution for the city of Naples, which at that time was looking forward to the estate of a free city. It is also said that Campagna that he lacked the beauty and idealism for the greater Platonists. And while this is probably true, this book is witness to the ills of his own time and a reminder to us that most of the evils he pointed out remain uncorrected. Yeah, dude, and this is like the 1600s. Okay. And we're the pinnacle of mankind right now. That's what everyone has us believe, right? Everyone. That's vague. In the year 1613, Trajano Boccalini, aged 77, was strangled to death in his bed by hired assassins. At least this is one account. We are informed by another historian that he died of colic. A third describes his demise as a result of being slugged with sandbags. Anyhow, he died. And it is believed that Trajano's end was due to a book which he published entitled Ragu Raguagli di Parsano, a witty expedition of the foibles of his time. That word foibles always kind of makes me giggle inside first, and sometimes I let it come out on this side too. Foibles. Okay. The 77 section, the 77th section. Oh my gosh, right. And he was aged 77. All of this stuff, right? It's just like, and the seventh daughter of the seventh daughter of the seventh daughter, the seventh son. Okay. I'm sorry, I got lost. Oh gosh, I'm trying to nip it in the bud here with the apologizing. If I'm going to say I'm sorry, I need to say I apologize. That's my aim, okay? The 77th section of his book is titled A General Reformation of the World. Like the other utopians, Boccalini made use of a fable to point out political evils and their corrections. Apollo, the god of light and truth, is dismayed by the increasing number of suicides occurring among men. So he appoints a committee composed to the wisest philosophers of all time to examine into the state of the human race. These men bring a detailed account of numerous recommendations to Apollo. Nearly every excuse me. Nearly every evil of modern government is included, ranging from protective tariffs to usury in private debt. The final conclusion reached by the committee is that the human problem is unsolvable except through a long process involving suffering and disaster. As an immediate remedy, the best that could be done was to regulate the price of cabbages, which seemed to be the only article not defended by an adequate force of public opinion or a large enough lobby in places of power. I think I have to read that whole sentence again. As an immediate remedy, the best that could be done was to regulate the price of cabbages, which seemed to be the only article not defended by an adequate force of public opinion or a large enough lobby in places of power, right? It's like Boccalini's satire is important because it constituted the first published statement of the Society of the Rosicrucians. It points out that first, evils must be recognized, then the public must be educated to assume its proper responsibility in the correction of these evils, and last, public opinion must force the reformation of the state and curb the ambitions of politicians. Boom. This was a solemn pronouncement in the opening years of the 17th century. And it is little wonder that it cost Boccalini his life. Just a little bit left here. Johann Valentin Andreae, an early 17th century German Lutheran theologian, was the next to cast his lot with the utopians. Andrea's status is difficult to define, but he is generally believed to be at least the editor of the Great Rosicrucian Manifestos, and the author of The Chemical Marriage of Christian Rosenkreuz. We may therefore safely assume that he was connected with one of the great orders of the quest. Andrea's contribution to the utopian literature is his Christianopolis, or the City of Christ. This work, which is almost unknown to English readers, is largely developed from the ideals of Plotinus. Christianopolis is Platonopolis, Christianized. Its author was a quiet scholar with a long white beard and a strict sense of Lutheran propriety. His Christianopolis is a monument of morality and good taste, but beneath his strict orthodoxy, Andrea was a man of broad vision. His city is governed by the wise and is enriched with all the arts and sciences. There is no poverty. The citizens are happy because each is performing his task motivated by an understanding of the dignity of human life. To my mind, it is dignity of values that makes Christianopolis a great book. In order to live wisely, men must have a sense of participation in the present good and future good. There must be a reason for living. There must be a purpose understandable to all, vital enough and noble enough to be the object of a common consecration. Andrea tells us again and again in the quaint wording of his old book, for lack of vision, the peoples perish. It reminded for the master of all fable, Sir Francis Bacon, to bind together the vision of the utopias with supreme artistry. It is the philosophical catastrophe that Bacon's New Atlantis was left unfinished. Or was it left unfinished? Rumor has it that the book was actually completed, but was never published in full form because it told too much. The final section of Bacon's fable are said to have revealed the entire pattern of the secret societies which had been working for thousands of years to achieve the ideal commonwealth in a political world. I have examined 2 old manuscripts relating to this subject and found them most provocative. But it might be less to the point to discuss that which Lord Bacon was compelled to conceal. Then there is so much that is worthy of our consideration in the parts of the work actually published. Interesting. All right, you guys. I'm going to call it right here. We got through another 5 chapters, and we'll start with 11 next time. So, man, thank you, one and all. Oh, my. Let's find some chords here. Good times. And, yeah, I shall see you alls on the next read. Possibly tomorrow. I have a show tomorrow evening really late, so maybe in the afternoon I'll do it. And then I think Corey and I are even going to live stream that performance at Polino's tomorrow. So we'll see what shakes. I might make a thing up for that. So thanks for coming and listening. That was some more juicy info. Excellent. I'll see you guys soon. Mwah.